Okay, so today's video, hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a frequently asked questions video. I haven't done one of these in a long time. This one's about outlining and brainstorming. So I asked you guys on Twitter and on the community page for this YouTube channel, my YouTube channel, for your questions. So I have 10 that are picked out. I'm gonna try to go through as many as I possibly can without this video being too long. Let me just find the questions. Okay, so this is a bunch of pictures that my phone made really, really small. So we'll see if I can read them. First question is from, okay, there's a plane, whatever. Evie Redding. Planes. First question is from Evie. She said, any tips for those of us who always come up with characters first, but no plots? And this answer applies to the reverse. If you come up with a bunch of plots, but you can't really come up with characters, I suggest starting with or using an outlining book to help you out, or a plot-based book to help you out a little bit and help you brainstorm some. So this is still sitting here from last week's video, but Save the Cat and probably John Trevise are the two that I would recommend helping you really understand how character and plot intertwine, character and outlining intertwine. Basically, the story all centers around your character. So if you don't have any plot, but you have a character, I would almost think that you have a little bit more of an advantage than people who don't have a plot but have a character. Did I say that wrong? You guys know what I mean. This pregnancy brain is like so if you're somebody who can create really believable and really amazing and like detailed characters with depth, but you can't really come up with a plot, definitely check out some plot books, because I feel like it's not something I can really answer in like a short video like this, but the plot has to be that character's journey to a major change in their life. So think about maybe like what their biggest change is going to be in their entire life, and that's what your story is going to be about. If you have a story but there's really no character change, your character will tend to fall flat, and it's something that sometimes readers can't pick up on why they don't like your character, but if there is no change throughout the story, they just feel like nothing's happening. Even if there's so much happening in your plot, if nothing happens with your character, they feel like nothing's happening at all in the entire story. So if you have a character, definitely try to think about what the biggest change in their life is going to be, and then maybe how, like if you have an idea for a world or an idea for like a romance or something like that, maybe try to like, how is that character going to change the most in this relationship? How is that character going to change the most in this world? And make it specific to exactly what genre you're trying to write, I guess. Okay, question 2 comes from DG Barnes. When I'm brainstorming, I never know what questions to ask of an idea. I've read a lot about asking what if, then I'm like, what if what? So what questions do you ask? I ask questions like, if basically starting from point A to point B, what needs to happen? I will literally write out what needs to happen. So if I have character A, I know is going to, so let's just say character's name is Jesse. I'm pulling one from my own story. If Jesse is going to walk into a building, I know he's going to walk in the building. I know he has to get into the building. And then Jesse gets ambushed and attacked. What happens in between there? What needs to happen? So those are kind of the questions that I ask. So I basically start from like at point A, and I know this one. So a lot of times some people will know the ending of their story, but they won't know like the middle. They'll know the beginning and the ending. I'll ask what if. So I'll kind of ask like what needs to happen in between to get like mechanically from point A to point B, like what change do they need to have? Do they need to learn a new skill? And then I'll ask on top of that, like what if? So if they have to learn a new skill, what if the training grounds are in another realm? Or like, what if the weapons that they need have all been seized by the government, or anything like that? So kind of the what if part is really more for what obstacles can your character what obstacles can happen in the story to make it a little more interesting. And then the other questions I ask are really like, what needs to happen? ? questions. So, but I always type out that question because for some reason just typing that out and seeing it on on the screen helps me to almost like bounce the idea off of myself in a way. So I hope that helps. Next question is from Nicole Wolf. I keep trying to outline, but I can never seem to stick with it. It helps me get over writer's block, but I can't seem to write a developed outline on its own. Once writer's block is gone, I can't seem to stick to my outlining and go back to writing. Any tips? So my first inclination is that you might be a combination of a pantser and a plotter. So you don't have to be a plotter. So a pantser is somebody who writes by the seat of their pants. They don't use an outline at all. And then a plotter is somebody who uses a detailed outline or uses an outline of some kind. And so my first inclination is that you might not be one or the other. You might be a combination of the two. And it does take experimentation to find out what balance works the best for you. Like if you need that creative freedom while you're writing, then you might lean more towards pantser. If you like the creative freedom in the outlining process, and then but you want a little bit of a tiny hint of freedom while you're writing to come up with what you want to come up with, then you might be a little more towards outliner, but still somewhere in the middle. That seems to be what you're naturally going towards, is being in the middle somewhere. So definitely, if it helps you overcome writer's block, then you are a little bit of an outliner. And then since it seems like you deviate from your outline, it seems like you're a little bit of a pantser. And that's totally like I'm a combination, I'm in the middle too. So almost accepting that, I think is going to be part of what's going to help you out in that there's nothing wrong with that. Like you can be both of them and be totally an amazing writer and produce amazing work. Also, I think what would help in this situation is just knowing that your first draft is gonna suck. So just as long as you are following your outline somewhat, and then if you have any like little plot bunnies basically of like, oh, the story wants to go this way, just readjust your outline as you go and then continue to go on. Basically readjust so you don't come upon any issues that would need major rewrites if you didn't kind of flesh them out right now. So kind of readjust your outline and then keep going with whatever writing that you want. And then just know your first draft is gonna suck. Just get it out on paper. I know it's hard. The more you do it, the easier it gets. I think to a threshold. It doesn't get totally easy, I think. Next question is from Lucia. I hope I'm saying that right. When brainstorming, how do you know if an idea is worth exploring and not just a dead end? This is a really good question. I think that every story just won't be a dead end. I think if you work with it enough, if you find out what's wrong with your story, if you, you might have to work with an editor for this, like a developmental editor, or you might have to go through plot structure books if the story is not really working out. But I think any idea can be made into a successful story. And I think that's what's amazing and great about writing is that you can do so much with just so little. You can start with a little tiny seed of an idea and it can develop in this crazy direction. But as long as you have, I think, the basic elements of a good story and what human beings like to hear as stories, because we're almost trained to like certain types of stories, almost based on instinct. And I could go way into topic on that, like way into in depth on that, but pretty much there's certain types of stories that we like. And I think some people think that's very limiting, but there's an infinite number of ways that little idea can fit into, say, just one story structure, like the hero journey story structure. So it's just all the other tiny little elements that come into play. So I think if you have one story idea, you can just run with it. Like, see where it takes you, and there's so many possibilities with it. I think that every story can be a good story. It just might need a little bit of reworking, but that's what the whole process of writing is about, is improving yourself as a writer and then finding out those little things. Next question is from Dandelions Inc. When you are actively brainstorming, do you keep notes in categories, or do you just go with the flow before outlining? So I do keep all of my notes in categories. My plot I keep in a category, like any plot ideas that I have, character development, I keep them in separate categories, in separate, in one big document, but in big separate blocks so that I can keep things a little more organized. because I'm sure we've all done this. I'm sure everybody watching this has done this, where you have a million notes in a million different places and you can't remember where they are. And some of them might be really good notes, and then there's some people that are like, if you can't remember it, then it's not a good note. Totally not true. Definitely use categories to keep yourself organized. Farouk asked, how detailed are your outlines? Do you summarize the chapter or just note the plot points? I try to keep things for my outline, it needs to be a bird's eye view, so I try to keep it to like one sentence, the main thing that happens. And then once I start to, once I have the meat ideas of everything, and even while I'm getting the meat, I like to use Scrivener, so I have like the title of the card is my one sentence thing, and then I can add more notes in the like underneath the title portion of the note card, if that makes sense. But the actual outline, I try to keep pretty brief. The Elysian Prophecy, I had like I don't even know, something ridiculous, like a 13-page outline. I don't know what it was, but it was too long. So I try not to do that anymore, because you want to be able to see the big picture elements of what's happening. You don't want to get too far into the forest, too far into the trees, so that you can't see the forest. Okay, Catalina asked, how do you outline a story told from multiple points of view? This is a good question. They're all good questions, but I've written a couple books, it's gonna be 3 soon, with using multiple points of view. So the thing that I have done is I pretty much separate each story, even if they're happening at the same time. I almost separate them. Oh, this is an interesting question because, oh my gosh. So my stories, each character has their own, basically in every multiple point of view story, the character needs to have their own journey, their own story. So it needs to be a complete story almost on its own, but you're just seeing multiple sides of a story that's connected, if that makes sense. For the types of ones that I write, I know there's so many types of multiple point of view books that you can write. But basically what I do is I separate my 2 characters, and I have full outline of each story, each character's story, the change that they're going to go through, all the different elements. I do the exact same thing for both of them and go through them, and then I almost weave them together. So I see which scenes fit where, like in the timeline of my story, what needs to happen when for pacing. So I pretty much do it separate first, and then try to go like maybe back and forth, or like if you have more than 2, you'd have to try to balance like character time. So you don't want to spend like 50 pages on this character and then like 2 pages on this one, 5 pages on this one. It's almost, I feel like you need to have like a little bit of a balance. It can take some practice trying to figure out where things go. But again, if you're doing just one sentence outline plot points, it's so much easier to see like, okay, this definitely has to happen before this. If both characters have like the same, like if they're both confronted by somebody or they're both confronted by somebody, and you can kind of do it where it happens back to back, so where it raises the tension of the whole story. I like to do that. But yeah, that's just kind of like stylistic thing, but definitely separate first and then weave them together. Next question is from Elle. What is the best free writing app for outlining? Any outlining tips for beginners? Comment down below if you have an outlining program that you like to use, like an app or something down below that's free. I like to use Scrivener, but I don't know if there is one. If you know of one, comment down below so we can you can help me answer this question. And then any outlining tips for beginners? Just read a plot book, because outlining, you have to have a good structure for plot and like the understanding of story before you can really produce a good outline. So even though it takes some time, go through and work your story idea with one of those books. That's my biggest tip. I think that's the best way that you can learn really quickly how to outline well is using a book. And some people might think that's formulaic writing, or it might take away some creativity, but you will have opportunity for creativity. It doesn't take away at all from any of that. So just give it a whirl, give it a try. I know it takes time, but that's my best tip for beginners. All right, this next question is absolutely tiny on my phone, from Sarah. What would you do if you know certain characters or aspects, like the beginning, but you have no clue about the ending of the story. Or when you're filled with so many possibilities that you don't know which one to choose because, again, you don't know what ending you want. Okay, so this one is a good one. Sometimes if I have two different directions that my story could go, I kind of like mini plot. I like mini outline each one to see where it'll go. So where it could go and which one I like better, like which theme I like better or which, character change that happens in those two little diverging paths. I just see which one I like better. And then sometimes if you can't find one that you like better, it might be that neither one of them is a bad choice. I know that it's kind of a cop-out, but it might be something where you can't lose with either one of them, but I will take the time and I'll bullet out like, okay, then this would happen, then this happens, and this happens. And I do that so many times in my writing. I do it all the time. I'm like, ooh, what if this happened? What if this happened? What if this happened? Separate from my original path, I'll kind of go down this little thing and I might change things. So definitely try to figure out where it would go from there and then see which one you like better. So if you have a beginning but you don't have an ending, again, I feel like I would ask the question for the character that you have, what's the biggest change that they're going to go through in the story, like in your world? And if you already know certain aspects, I think like your ending, like your climax has to be like, your character basically goes through their worst possible, like they're in their lowest, their depths of despair, like they're at the lowest point in their life, and then some huge battle happens or some huge psychological battle happens, like an argument or fight with somebody that prompts change in themselves. So I think just trying to ask those questions of, okay, so I have these three characters, like what's the biggest change that could happen or what's the worst thing that could happen? And then that will kind of like bring about change and address your character weakness. This is just so, I wanted to do a frequently asked questions video on this, but I feel like there's so much with outlining that I need to, I could talk about outlining forever. So I hope that was a little helpful. I know it's very vague. The MacGuffin asked, do you work foreshadowing into your outline? If so, tips. Definitely work foreshadowing into your outline. I think Chekhov's gun is one of the rules. Like if you have a weapon that comes into play later on in the novel, kind of show it at the beginning. And this can ruin some plot twists, so you kind of have to do it carefully if it is going to play into your plot twist. Because like in a movie, if I see something like, if you see this, the camera pan to the character setting down their knife, they're about to get attacked and they're not going to have their knife. Like, because Chekhov's gun, they planted it right there. But definitely foreshadowing is a great thing. You can foreshadow through other characters. So if your character's biggest weakness is X, there's a huge trend in foreshadowing for another character to sort of like hint towards that weakness or that change that the character has to go through at the beginning. I just finished watching Gothica. It was in Gothica. So it's like things like that you pick up on and you start to see it in more places. So just try to think of ways to foreshadow, because it almost makes it feel like the reader is more engaged in the story and is looking for those things. So instead of just kind of reading a story and starting from beginning and going to end, they pick up on those things and then they wonder like, ooh, are they going to tie this back in? Like they kind of mentally flag it. So definitely use foreshadowing, include it in your outline. I'm going to end it there. I feel like this video is getting a little too long. I could go on and on about brainstorming and outlining, so I definitely need to do more videos on the topic. But next week, I'm going to be going over how to write a novel for beginners. So like starting from the beginning, kind of an overview of what you need to do to get your feet on the ground with your story idea and get started with writing your novel. All right, that's all I have for you today. I hope this was helpful. I hope it answered some of your questions. But I hope I wasn't too vague. I will see you next week. That is a video that you do not want to miss. And yeah, until then, happy writing. Bye guys.